Of tariffs, President Trump's latest mantra, we're not going to be ripped off anymore, as he followed up that 25% tariff on steel and aluminum yesterday with a new threat today of 200% tariffs on European wine and spirits, a retaliatory move against European levies on American whiskey. Complicating the picture, there appears to be no clear path toward a ceasefire in this trade war, with American consumers bracing for impact where they shop. Christine Romans is here. Christine, where do things stand right now?
Lester, this 3-week-long rout on Wall Street deepened here. The Standard & Poor's 500 now down 10%, as you said, from the recent high. That's called a correction in Wall Street speak. The fear here, an escalating trade war will bring new costs to supply chains, just as consumers are already turning more cautious. Tariffs and retaliation on metals and farm products and appliances, and now potentially wine, as you said. The president threatening 200% tariffs on European wine, champagne, and spirits. At least some of that higher price likely to be passed to shoppers in the weeks ahead. Now, if the whole thing would be passed through, that would raise the price of a $20 bottle of wine to $60. Lester, that's just one example in a worsening trade tit for tat.
All right, Christine Roman starting us off. Thank you. Despite that sharp drop on Wall Street, President Trump tonight is doubling down on his tariff plans. With more on that, here's Gabe Gutierrez.
Tonight, President Trump showing no signs of backing off his new tariff threat.
We've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. No, I'm not going to bend at all.
The president calling the European Union hostile and abusive as he threatens 200% tariffs on European alcohol coming into the U.S. if Europe does not drop their new 50% levy on American whiskey.
We sell no cars to Europe. I mean, virtually no cars. And they sell millions of cars to us. It's like a one-way street with them. The European Union is very, very nasty.
All after the president Wednesday slapped 25% tariffs on imported steel and aluminum.
The president was totally annoyed that the Europeans did this, and so you're going to hear back from someone who emotionally cares about America.
Publicly, the administration projecting confidence, touting lower inflation, and both egg and gas prices coming down. But privately, NBC News has learned the stock market slide has Republicans concerned. Two people familiar with the discussion say officials at the White House's National Economic Council have indicated fears it could be difficult to rebound quickly from a downturn. Though in South Carolina, steel producer David Zalesny says Trump's tariffs are critical to saving American jobs.
You've seen a tremendous amount of fabricated structural steel coming across the border from Canada and really decimating and wiping out a lot of the domestic industry.
Today, President Trump mocking Canada again.
Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. Keeping "Oh Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great. Keep it. But it'll be for the state, one of our greatest states.
That did not go over well here in Canada today.
Mr. Rubio, is it appropriate for...
Where Secretary of State Marco Rubio took no questions from reporters at a G7 meeting. Social media erupting with calls to buy Canadian and boycott USA.
This is my last bag of American product.
The outrage rippling across Hamilton, Canada, home to major steel companies.
Total insanity. I don't know what Trump is doing, but hopefully there's... some plan behind his madness.
Americans need to feel pain. We can't just roll over and experience all the pain ourselves.
Meanwhile, Gabe, there's a new legal blow for the Trump administration's efforts to downsize the federal workforce.
Yes, Lester, a federal judge just ordered 6 federal agencies to immediately rehire thousands of probationary employees they fired last month, calling the justification for their firing a sham. Still, it's a temporary reprieve. The judge ruled the employees can be fired, just using different procedures. The Trump administration is appealing, Lester.
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. California is once again reeling from the aftermath of a fast-moving storm causing evacuations, rescues, even a rare tornado, with more severe weather on the way. NBC News' Steve Patterson has the latest.
Pounding rain, carried by howling winds, slamming into Southern California overnight. The late-season winter storm blasting neighborhoods, spewing dangerous debris from hillsides. In Orange County, swiftwater rescue teams airlifting a victim to safety after this SUV tumbled into a creek. Near Palm Springs, rescue teams pulling out 6 people after their cars were caught in mudslides. Thankfully, all were saved, treated, and released without injury. The storm even spawning an unusual LA County tornado.
The final damage assessment rating for this confirmed tornado is an EF0.
The National Weather Service confirming the small twister touched down in Pico Rivera, just south of LA, producing winds topping 85 miles per hour, toppling trees. Thankfully, nobody hurt, but neighbors forced to run for cover.
I was like, I was running for my life. Yeah, you know, I just got up, told my wife, get up, get the kids, and went to the back.
Tonight, 21 million under flood alerts across the state. The storm now moving east, turning its wrath to the rest of the country, rattling nerves in this already vulnerable, fire-scarred region, leaving a mess in its wake. Steve Patterson, NBC News.
We turn now to the arrests of nearly 100 pro-Palestinian protesters who flooded Trump Tower here in New York today. They were demanding the release of a Columbia University activist who is facing deportation. Laura Jarrett reports.
Protesters flooding the lobby inside Trump Tower in Manhattan today, outraged over the government's continued detention of Mahmoud Halil. The demonstration led by the group Jewish Voice for Peace, demanding the release of the 30-year-old grad student who became one of the faces of the protests against Israel at Columbia University last spring and now faces possible deportation. Police placing demonstrators in zip ties, escorting them up the iconic golden escalator after they staged a sit-in for more than an hour, ultimately arresting 98 people, leading them away in a police van and city bus.
Those arrests are for trespassing, obstructing government administration, and resisting arrest.
The outcry in New York and beyond, a response to immigration agents arresting Halil, a permanent U.S. resident, on Saturday, before then flying him to Louisiana, where he remains in a detention facility tonight. The Trump administration invoking a rarely used provision of immigration law in order to deport him, deeming him a threat to U.S. interests for supporting Hamas, which his lawyers deny, saying he's been charged with no crime and they've seen no evidence against him.
I think he's angry. I think he's confused and scared.
His deportation on hold for now as the Trump administration continues the fight in court.
Meantime, Columbia University confirming tonight that it has suspended or expelled some of the students that took over those buildings last spring. Lester, in some cases, even revoking degrees.
All right, Laura Jarrett, thank you. Now to Russian President Putin's response to that 30-day ceasefire proposal by President Trump, which Ukraine already accepted. Putin today saying he supports peace but had conditions of his own. NBC's Richard Engel is in Ukraine.
In his first comments on President Trump's 30-day ceasefire proposal, which was already accepted by Ukraine, Russia's President Putin tonight said he's in favor of the idea, then gave several reasons why he's not agreeing to it for now. The idea itself is right, and we absolutely support it, but there are questions we should discuss, he said, suggesting he'll call President Trump directly. President Putin went on to say a military pause would give Ukraine time to regroup and rearm, while Russian forces are making gains on the battlefield, especially in the Russian province of Kursk, where Putin just visited, donning fatigues and speaking of victory and new buffer zones.
Well, we'd like to see a ceasefire from Russia.
Still, President Trump described Putin's comments tonight as encouraging.
He put out a very promising statement, but it wasn't complete. Now we're going to see whether or not Russia's there, and if they're not, it'll be a very disappointing moment for the world.
On the front lines in Ukraine, troops aren't putting down the guns yet. They doubt Putin is seriously considering ending the war.
This soldier is scanning the sky for Russian drones. Even with all this talk of a ceasefire, soldiers out here say they're seeing no let-up in Russian attacks.
They say it's time to give peace a chance.
Everyone is waiting to see if Putin will also agree. What do you expect?
Russia's commitments, the soldier said, are not worth the paper they are printed on.
President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is in Moscow tonight pushing the ceasefire deal. Here in Ukraine, President Zelensky called Putin's comments predictable and manipulative.
All right, Richard Engel, thanks. Now to an update on a story we first told you about last summer. Robert Morris, the founder of the mega church Gateway, has been indicted on child sexual abuse charges. Antonia Hilton spoke with a woman who says he began to abuse her when she was 12.
The very thing.
Tonight, Robert Morris, founder of Gateway, one of the largest megachurches in America, has been indicted in Oklahoma on 5 counts of lewd or indecent acts with a child. This comes 8 months after NBC News investigated the story of Cindy Clemishire, who was just 12 years old when she says Morris, then a married traveling evangelical pastor, began sexually abusing her. Today, Cindy could hardly believe justice may be near.
I think most victims think this day will never come.
She says Morris began abusing her on Christmas Day, 1982.
He started by touching my breast and putting his hands in my pants.
Do you remember what he would say to you? What he'd tell you?
Well, the very first time he told me, you can't tell anyone because it will ruin everything.
The Oklahoma Attorney General Gentner Drummond, who's known Cindy her whole life, spoke exclusively with NBC News, explaining the statute of limitations didn't apply to Morris, thanks to an old statute stopping the clock for people who don't live in Oklahoma.
If you are a victim of child abuse, 1, my heart goes out to you. 2, if it occurred in the state of Oklahoma, contact me. Let's not assume that we cannot bring your offender to justice.
In June, Morris admitted to the Christian Post that he had inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady and resigned. But for years, he had been alluding to past transgressions in his sermons.
I was very immoral, and I was immoral a lot.
Morris and his attorneys have not responded for comment. Gateway Church told NBC News they are grateful for the work of the justice system in holding abusers accountable for their actions.
My message is always going to be to come forward, to speak up. It's the only way we'll ever stop child sexual abuse.
Cindy prays that other victims see their day in court too. Antonia Hilton, NBC News.
After the break in 60 seconds, when neo-Nazis targeted one Ohio town, the community united to fight back. We will take